3,000 years ago, a man carved his name so deep into stone that we still can't get rid of him. He claimed he was a god. He told everyone he won a battle he almost lost. He plastered his face on every surface in Egypt. Some of them weren't even his buildings. He just carved his name over someone else's work and said it was his. He fathered over 100 children, built monuments using forced labor, and somehow convinced the entire world he was the greatest pharaoh who ever lived. But was he? Or was he just the greatest marketer, the greatest liar, the greatest ego to ever sit on a throne? This is the story of Ramesses II, and it's time someone told the version he didn't carve into a wall. His full name was Ramesses II, son of Seti I, grandson of Ramesses I, born around 1303 BC in the Nile Delta. And let's get something straight from the beginning. He didn't earn his throne, he inherited it. His grandfather founded the 19th dynasty. His father kept it running. Ramesses was born on third base and spent the rest of his life telling everyone he hit a home run. Now, people romanticize ancient Egypt, the mystery, the grandeur, the gods. But let's be honest about what being pharaoh actually meant. You had absolute power, no checks, no balances, no one to tell you no. You controlled the military, the economy, the religion. You were literally worshipped as a living god, not elected, not chosen by the people, born into it. That's not impressive, that's lucky. And Seti I wasn't raising a well-rounded child. By 10, Ramesses held military rank. By 14, he was on campaign. Seti wasn't building a leader, he was building a weapon, a loyal extension of his own power. And Ramesses absorbed every bit of it. Not wisdom, not empathy, strategy, image, control. When Seti I died around 1279 BC, Ramesses took the throne at roughly 25, and his first instinct wasn't to help his people or reform anything. It was to prove he was better than his father, better than everyone. Every decision from this point forward was about one thing: Ramesses. Egypt's real problem at the time was the Hittite Empire. They controlled modern-day Turkey and Syria and were pushing south, two empires on a collision course. Ramesses' father had dealt with this through careful diplomacy and strategic skirmishes, measured, intelligent. Ramesses wanted war. In 1274 BC, he assembled roughly 20,000 soldiers, 4 divisions, war chariots, the works. He marched north toward Kadesh, a strategic city in modern-day Syria. This was going to be his moment, his proof, his legacy. And he nearly got himself and his entire army killed. Here's what happened. As Ramesses approached Kadesh, his scouts captured 2 Bedouin travelers who told him the Hittite army was far away, nowhere close. Ramesses believed them. He didn't verify, he didn't send more scouts, he didn't exercise basic military caution. He just pushed forward with 1 division, a quarter of his forces, because he was Ramesses, because he was invincible, because his ego wouldn't allow him to consider that someone might be lying to him. They were lying to him. The Bedouins were Hittite spies. King Muwatalli II had his entire army hidden behind the city. 40,000 soldiers, 3,500 war chariots. Ramesses had walked his men into a slaughter. The Hittite chariots slammed into the Egyptian flank. His division collapsed. Soldiers ran. The self-proclaimed living god was about to die because he was too arrogant to double-check information from 2 random strangers in the desert. I've seen people verify a restaurant review more carefully than Ramesses verified enemy intelligence before his biggest battle. He survived. Reinforcements arrived from an unexpected direction at the last possible moment, not because of his planning, not because of divine intervention, because he got lucky. Both sides took heavy casualties. The Hittites held Kadesh. Ramesses retreated south. It was a draw at best, a near-catastrophic failure at worst. Thousands of Egyptian soldiers died because their pharaoh was reckless. Now here's where Ramesses did what Ramesses did best. He lied. He went back to Egypt and carved the Battle of Kadesh on every major temple in the country. Abu Simbel, Karnak, Luxor, the Ramesseum, massive reliefs showing him towering over Hittite soldiers, alone on his chariot, crushing the enemy single-handedly, while the god Amun guided his hand. The inscriptions described total domination, divine victory, a pharaoh so powerful that he defeated an entire army by himself. None of it was true. But who was going to correct him? There was no free press, no opposition party, no internet. The average Egyptian couldn't read. They saw the giant carvings of their pharaoh destroying the enemy, and they believed it. Ramesses didn't just control the military, he controlled reality. He was the first person in history to understand that it doesn't matter what actually happened, it matters what people think happened. Some people call this genius, I call it fraud. Thousands of soldiers died because of his mistake, and he turned it into a victory lap. He didn't honor the dead, he used them as the backdrop for his own ego. For over 3,000 years, the world believed his version. It wasn't until archaeologists found Hittite records in the 1900s that we got the other side. The Hittites claimed they won. The truth is that neither side won, but Ramesses had already gotten away with it. The greatest cover-up in military history, not by destroying evidence, but by drowning the truth in propaganda. But Kadesh didn't solve anything. The Hittites were still there. Ramesses kept campaigning, year after year, battle after battle. He won smaller engagements, recaptured some territories, but the war dragged on, resources drained, soldiers died, and the Hittites weren't going anywhere. Then the Hittite king Muwatalli II died. His successor, Hattusili III, faced internal problems. Both empires were exhausted. Both saw the Assyrians rising in the east. So in 1258 BC, they signed a peace treaty. And yes, it was the first recorded peace treaty in history. People bring this up like Ramesses deserves a Nobel Prize for it. But let's be clear, he signed this treaty because he couldn't win, not because he wanted peace, not because he valued human life, because 16 years of war had proven he couldn't crush the Hittites, no matter how many soldiers he threw at them. This wasn't wisdom, this was exhaustion dressed up in diplomacy. To seal the deal, he married Hattusili III's daughter, another addition to his collection, because that's what women were to Ramesses, diplomatic tools, trophies. His great love, Nefertari, gets romanticized constantly. He built her a temple at Abu Simbel. He wrote, "My love is unique. No one can rival her." Beautiful, right? He had over 100 children with multiple wives. He built his own temples 10 times bigger than hers. The temple he built for her at Abu Simbel sits right next to his own, which features 4 66-foot statues of himself. Her temple has smaller statues, some of which are also him. He literally couldn't give her a monument without making it about himself. And speaking of monuments, let's talk about the building. Ramesses built more monuments than any pharaoh in history. Abu Simbel, the Ramesseum, expansions at Karnak and Luxor, a new capital city, Ramesses, statues of himself everywhere, colossal, towering, inescapable. But who built them? Tens of thousands of laborers, many of them forced, prisoners of war, subjugated peoples, generations of workers whose names we will never know because they weren't important enough to carve into stone. Ramesses was, they weren't. Every monument you admire was built on someone's back, someone who didn't choose to be there, someone who never got a statue, never got a wall carving, never got remembered. And here's the detail that really says everything about Ramesses. He didn't just build new monuments, he took existing monuments, monuments built by previous pharaohs. He had their names chiseled off and replaced with his own. Then he carved his name inches deep into the stone so that no one could do the same to him. He was literally stealing credit from dead kings and making sure no one could steal it from him. That's not greatness, that's insecurity carved in granite. He also built the city of Ramesses. Some scholars believe this was near the region described in the biblical book of Exodus. Whether or not you take Exodus literally, the historical reality is that Ramesses' building projects relied on massive forced labor. The grand monuments were not gifts to civilization, they were products of oppression. The scale of his construction tells you the scale of the suffering required to make it happen.
Ramesses ruled for 67 years. He outlived most of his wives. He outlived 12 of his sons. People frame this as tragic, the lonely king who watched everyone die. Maybe. Or maybe it's what happens when one man hoards all the power and resources of an entire civilization for nearly 7 decades, while everyone around him serves his vision until they break. He was roughly 90 when he died in 1213 BC. His body was mummified and placed in the Valley of the Kings. His mummy was found in 1881, remarkably preserved, red hair still visible. In 1974, his mummy was sent to France for preservation. French law required a passport for anyone entering the country, so Egypt issued Ramesses II a passport, occupation, king. He was received with full military honors at the Paris airport. People tell this story like it's heartwarming, a final tribute to a great king. I think it's the perfect ending to his story. 3,000 years later, and we're still performing for him. Still honoring the myth, still treating the propaganda as reality. He manipulated the narrative so completely that even modern governments play along. The poet Shelley wrote about him, called him Ozymandias. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. The poem was about the futility of ego, that even the most powerful men are forgotten, their works crumble, their names fade. People say Shelley was wrong because Ramesses is still remembered, his monuments still stand, his name is still everywhere. But I think Shelley was right, just not in the way people assume. Ramesses wanted to be remembered as a god, as the greatest warrior, the greatest builder, the greatest pharaoh. And for 3,000 years, he was. But now we have the Hittite records, we have archaeology, we have context, and the image cracks. He was a man born into absolute power, who nearly lost his first major battle because of arrogance, who lied about it on a civilizational scale, who built monuments to himself using forced labor, who stole credit from other pharaohs, who treated peace as a last resort, who plastered his own face across an entire country because he couldn't handle the idea of being forgotten. He wasn't a god, he was a man terrified of being seen as one. He started with every advantage imaginable. He nearly threw it all away. He spent the rest of his life constructing an image so overwhelming that no one could question it. He carved his insecurity into mountains. He wrote his lies on temple walls. He made the whole world remember him. But now we know the truth. And knowing the truth, the question isn't whether Ramesses was the greatest pharaoh who ever lived. The question is whether greatness built on lies is greatness at all.